Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 6 English lesson on relative pronouns. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts. We're doing grade 6. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter relative pronouns. Relative pronouns. All right. So our chapter is relative pronouns. Our subject is English language arts. We are doing grade 6. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of relative pronouns is to identify relative pronouns and to use relative pronouns who and whom. Use relative pronouns who and whom. All right. So when it comes to relative pronouns, right? A relative pronoun introduces a dependent or a relative clause that describes a noun or it describes a pronoun. So a relative pronoun introduces a dependent clause that describes a noun or pronoun. All right. So we said a relative pronoun introduces a dependent clause. Remember, a dependent clause, right? Cannot stand on its own. So a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or it describes a pronoun. And if we look at our relative pronouns, right, then we have five main relative pronouns. And our five main relative pronouns are words like who, whom, whose, which, and that. And we said a relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent or relative clause to describe that describes a noun or that describes a pronoun. And if we look at the first one, right, how to use the first relative pronoun, it says the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. The woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. The next one says, Peter, whom you met yesterday. Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So Peter, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So whom we use. Peter, whom you, not who you, whom you met yesterday, has four younger brothers. So now the next one says Emily, whose hair is quite long, likes wearing braids. So Emily, whose hair is quite long, likes wearing braids. So whose over there? Because whose hair are we talking about? We're talking about Emily's hair. And the next one says, I just read Janet's new book, which came out last month. So I just read Janet's book, which came out last night. Not that came out last night, which came out last night. Right? So if we talk about something that belonging to someone, so which, it's Janet's book, which. Then we says this is the dress referring to an item that I wore to my uncle's wedding. That I wore to my uncle's wedding. It's in, right? So these are our five relative pronouns, right? And we said the relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent or regular clause or relative clause, and it describes a noun or pronoun. So it describes the person or describes a thing that we are talking about within the sentence. It either mentions who does something to whom we are, for example, having a conversation about or with, whose something we are talking about, which object or thing, as well as that object or thing we are talking about. And that is a relative pronoun. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca, and we're going to identify the relative pronouns. So we're going to identify the regular pronouns within the sentences. All right. And remember, we said with our relative pronoun, we have five main common relative pronouns. And the five relative pronouns are words like who and whom and whose, which and that. And we said a relative pronoun, it introduces a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or it describes a pronoun. And we have our five main relative pronouns. And we use those five relative pronouns to describe the noun or a noun phrase by using who and whom and whose, which and that. All right, let's go to our test. We need to select the relative pronoun within the sentence. It says Bruce has an excellent memory, which serves him well on tests. So Bruce has an excellent memory, which serves him well on tests. We need to select our relative pronoun within that sentence. What is the relative pronoun within that sentence? The relative pronoun. And if we were to choose the correct pronoun or relative pronoun, we would say which. Yes, which is correct. So well done, which is correct. We need to select the relative pronoun within the sentence. Ronnie, who loves to experiment with new flavors, took cooking classes in Thailand. Ronnie, who loves to experiment with new flavors, took cooking classes in Thailand. What is our relative pronoun within that sentence? Ronnie, who? All right, so if we were to choose, we would say option two, who. Yes. Who is correct. Well done. The next one says, we took a ferry to Ellis Island, which is a popular tourist spot. So we took a ferry to Ellis Island, which is a popular tourist spot. Which one is correct? And if we were to choose the correct option, it says we took a ferry to Ellis Island, which is a popular tourist spot. Well done. So which is correct? The next one says we need to select the relative pronoun. Does the restaurant still serve the dessert that I like? And if we were to choose the correct relative pronoun within that sentence, then we'll say, does the restaurant still serve the dessert that I like? So that I like. Yes, well done. That is correct. The next one says, I'm not familiar with the route that Bridget suggested. I'm not familiar with the route that Bridget suggested. We need to select the relative pronoun within that sentence. I'm not familiar with the route that Bridget suggested. I'm not familiar with the route that Bridget suggested, and if we were to select the relative pronoun, then we'll go with the word that. Yes, well done. That is correct. The next one says, are the library books that I checked out due already? We need to select the relative pronoun. Which one is it? All right. It says, are the library books that I checked out due already? So that is our relative pronoun. All right, so now we're going to use relative pronouns who and whom. We're only going to use that to whom and we're going to use who, right? And it says that a relative pronoun introduces a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or pronoun. And that relative pronoun, who and whom, it gives us information about people. Who are we talking about? Whom are we talking about? They give us information about people. All right. Now we're going to look at this activity before we go to our test. It says a person, do we say a person who or person whom have? A person who or person whom has a toothache should consult a dentist immediately. All right. So we said a person who. So we said here a person who has toothache should consult a dentist immediately. A person who. So we don't say a person whom. Person who has toothache should consult a dentist immediately. Who? Yes, well done. The chef, do we say the chef whom or the chef who? All right. So we say the chef whom. Do we say who or do we say whom? So the chef whom I took a cooking class from studied in Paris. So whom studied in Paris. All right. So we said whom. And the last one, it says the friend. Do we say the friend who or the friend whom I invited still hasn't arrived? Do we say the friend who I invited or the friend whom I invited? And if we were to choose the correct one, we would say the friend whom I invited still hasn't arrived. All right. Oopsie. All right. So now we're going to our test where we are going to complete the sentence with the best relative pronoun by either using who or using whom. It says a person who has toothache should consult a dentist, or a person whom have toothache should consult a dentist. Which one is the correct option? So the person who or the person who has toothache should consult a dentist immediately. And if we were to choose the correct option, and then we will say a person who has toothache. Yes, you need to go and see a dentist. All right, the next one says we need to complete the sentence with the best relative pronoun. The Olympic divers. Do we say who represent the United States will likely earn medals, or do we say whom represent the United States will likely earn medals? And if we were to choose the correct one, so the Olympic divers who represent the United States will get a medal. The chef, do we say the chef whom I took cooking classes from studied in Paris? Or the chef who I took cooking classes from studied in Paris? Which one is correct? So the chef whom I took cooking classes from studied in Paris? Or do we say the chef who I took cooking classes from studied in Paris? Which one is correct? Who or whom? And if we want to select our pronoun, then we would say the chef whom I took cooking class from studied in Paris. Well done. Whom is correct? The next one says, I'm wary of Dakota, who I don't completely trust. Or do I say, I'm wary of Dakota, whom I don't completely trust? So I'm wary of Dakota, who or whom I don't completely trust. So it's I'm wary of whom I don't completely trust. Right? So that was both mine and your mistake. So whom I don't completely trust. All right. It says Janet wanted a kayaking instructor. Do we say whom had plenty of experience working with beginners or who had plenty of experience working with beginners? Which one is the correct one? Whom or who had plenty experience with working with beginners? Guys, why are we saying no or yes? And if we were to choose the correct option, we would say Janet wanted a kayaking instructor who had plenty of experience working with beginners. Can we please stop saying yes and no, please? All right, the next one says an award will go to the person who collects the most badges, or an award will go to the person whom collects all badges. Which one is correct? And if we were to choose the correct option, we will say an award will go to the person who collects the most badges. So who? The next one says, this is now the last one. Okay, the second. This is the last one. It says, Denise, whom we met last week, just emailed me. Or do we say, Denise, who we met last week, just emailed me? Whom we met or who we met? Which one is correct? So do we say Denise, whom we met last week, just emailed me, or do I say Denise, who we met last week, just emailed me? So it is whom. So look, when it comes to relative pronouns, right? If you can replace the word with either she or maybe with he or another subject, right? Let's say if we can replace it with another subject, then we use the word whom, all right? We use the word whom. And if we can replace it with another object pronoun, then we use the word whom, right? But well done for trying. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on relative pronouns. We said we have 5 different relative pronouns, which is who, whom, whose, which, and that, right? And when it comes to our relative pronouns, it introduces a dependent or relative clause that describes a noun or a pronoun. We either describe them by saying who or whom or which, that, or. All right. So that is the end of our lesson on relative pronouns. Thank you very much for joining the class, and I really hope you guys are going to have a good day further. Goodbye.